Do you ever have people come up to you and say, I loved Interstellar, Chris, but what was it about? Or can you explain what happens? Because I enjoyed it, but I must admit, you know, I slightly lost the plot. Not the first time that's happened, but do you get that?
I get that sort of equally with most of my films.
Do you?
That is to say, you know, I'll have people ask me that about Inception, for example, and I wouldn't say it'd been asked any more with Interstellar. I mean, people, different sections of the audience get different things out of the films. I mean, when you try and make a film that has a certain density to it, you do, to a certain extent, split up your audience response. But as long as you're getting something out of it, then we're doing okay. I mean, for me, really, the best kind of film you can make, or the most interesting kind of film you can make, is one that maybe somebody's interested to look at it a second time and get something different from it.
Okay. Do you fancy doing something else, a stripped down thing, something like a rom-com or a musical? If somebody came to you with that kind of pitch, would you go, well, look, I've nailed these time-traveling odysseys. Yeah, I'm going to do Singing in the Rain for the new generation.
Well, I sort of never say never, but I am a big believer in being sincere about your passion for something, and I do love all types of cinema. But at the same time, when I come to do a project, I never want to be doing a project to just, for example, to show versatility. I wouldn't do a project for that reason. So I think all the films I've made, I like to think that they're connected in certain ways, but that they're also different from each other. That's as best as I can put it. And so I'd like to continue working along those lines, really with a view, first and foremost, to being sincere in my passion for the project, because each film you take on, at whatever scale it's played out at, you know, it's a couple of years of my life, sometimes more. So you really want to be passionate about what it is that you're doing.
How have you managed to get movies like Memento, Inception, Interstellar through the studio system? Because one remembers stories of the old days that the old guys who ran the studios would look at a film, and if they didn't think it would play in Milwaukee, if it was too clever, they would say, you know, go back to the drawing board so people can follow it. Yours have been tangled, knotty films. How do you get away with that?
Well, I mean, ultimately I've got away with it because the audiences have been willing to come along for the ride. And anytime you make a film like Memento, and the audience comes, even though it's challenging material for that genre and that scale, that buys you some credibility with the people who are going to finance your next film. I was actually doing a talk at the National Film School last night, and somebody put up their hand and said, well, how do you pitch a project like Inception? How do you get a film like Inception made? And I made a joke, you know, somewhat glibly, just saying, well, the first thing you do is you make The Dark Knight, because it made a huge amount of money for the studio, and then you come in with Inception and say, okay, how about this? But even though I said it as a joke, there was a lot of truth to it, because really it was about Warner Brothers showing a lot of trust, you know, and saying, okay, you'll be able to execute on this. And be able to make it comprehensible to an audience. So I think part of what it is being able to communicate how you're going to get this across to the audience when you talk to the studio about it, and not show a disregard for the audience when you're dealing with the studio, because you have to recognize the economic realities you're dealing with. You're spending a lot of money on one of these films where it has such scale and there are such big things that you want to put on screen. You have to be willing to take on the responsibility that is going to play wider, and I think that's been a big part of my relationship with the studios, is really trying to be honest and open about what the ambitions are for the film.
Now we're in this august library, it's all about the truth of film. So here and on the record, who's the most difficult person you've worked with in the acting profession? Who's the one where you've stood outside the Winnebago going, come on, pal? Because it happens, doesn't it?
You know, to be honest, as a director, you're really responsible for what that tone is on set. And people will ask me, what was this actor like to work with? What was that actor like to work with? The truth is, great actors, and I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of really, really great actors. They're all different. They all have a different process. And my job as a director is to find what they need from me and accommodate that and get the most out of them. And I pride myself on being able to do that.
How do you do the job? Because there's so much to juggle, isn't there? There's the budget, the weather, the locations, the prima donna who won't come out of the Winnebago, let's say, the schedule, the release date.
How do I do? I mean,
do you sleep at night when you're in the middle of these things?
You sleep just because you're exhausted, from pure exhaustion. I enjoy the multifaceted nature of the challenge. I enjoy having to be an expert on a lot of different things, or having to pretend to be an expert on a lot of different things. One of the things I love about directing is you don't specialize. You have to be able to really think of all the different aspects of the film at the same time. It's also important to surround yourself with collaborators who can take the pressure off certain aspects of it, and casting's a huge part of that. Finding actors. Some of the great actors I've worked with on the Dark Knight Trilogy, for example, who, they would recognize that, yes, we're also having to worry about flipping this truck or blowing this building up, whatever. And so their process would be balanced against that. And working with very generous performers was a big part of that. So I really do enjoy the challenge of putting together a lot of different aspects of one project and trying to be in control of that. I mean, it's a really fun thing.
Okay, one of your films that I particularly enjoyed was Insomnia with Al Pacino. Quite interesting to make. What are your memories of that? My only regret is that you didn't get a real signature mannerism out of him, unlike Scent of a Woman with the hoo-has going on.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing in working with Al, who is an amazing film actor, I mean, arguably, I would say one of the best who's ever lived. One of the things you learn from him is he would act very specifically for the film medium, and that is to say, he would ask you to do a number of takes. If you were doing a take of a 2-minute scene or something, he would produce a peak of energy or something, and he would shift it take to take. And the reason he would do that is because sometimes he would do something that was extreme or over the top, so that about 30 seconds later he would sort of hit just the right note. And so you have to edit the performance
to sort of G him up.
Well, just something in his process, exactly, to find the correct truth, the correct level of energy for the take. But what it means is, as a filmmaker, you then have huge opportunities in the edit suite, but you've also got a tremendous responsibility to try to be true to his original intention and draw from, if he's given you 12 takes, you're taking the beginning of take 2 and the middle of take 4 and the end of take 8. And that was a very careful process that I really loved doing. I mean, the fascinating thing with Al is he's also a great theatre actor, so he can do it completely differently as well. But he's so knowledgeable about film and film craft. It was a joy to work with him, and I learned an enormous amount doing it.
So you couldn't say, Al, that was fine, the first take's great, it's freezing up here, let's move on to the motel scene.
I could try, but I wouldn't get away with that, no. I mean, the really interesting thing for me when I look back at the dailies on that film is that we would do a lot of takes. We would do 10, 12 takes of anything. But I could have cut the entire film from his first take every time. He was
Is that
always
rare in
perfect,
your experience?
Extremely rare. I mean, he was in almost every scene of the film. He shot 53 days, I think. Every first take was perfect, absolutely perfect. He then explores in all kinds of different ways, in fascinating ways that really let you try different things thematically and let different elements of the story or different layers of the story kind of bubble to the surface. But as far as from a technical point of view, every first take perfect. I mean, he's so on it, so prepared, and you really have to raise your game when you work with him.
Okay, and Batman, a huge success. Very dark, very dystopian. Obviously, you collaborate on these films, and not entirely your vision. But is there some sense of that's how you see the way we are now, or is that reading too much into a movie?
Well, I think it's more a question of saying the opportunity you get with working in a particular genre, like the action movie genre, the superhero genre, working within a genre, it allows you, affords you the opportunity to explore things you're interested in or afraid of, neurosis you have, worries you have about the way the world is. It allows you to explore them in a very sort of exaggerated manner, in a way that you can really tap into the collective fears that we have as a society. And particularly in the case of Batman, you have the opportunity through his environment, through Gotham, to really offer a very dark reflection of the society we live in. And with my collaborators, David Goyer, my brother Jonah, at the script writing stage, we certainly were very careful not to be self-conscious in those aspects. So we tried to just write a great story first and foremost, but we also tried to be open to what are we really worried about? How does the world feel to us? What would you be most concerned about? In the case of The Dark Knight, it becomes very much about chaos and anarchy and the breakdown of society and so forth. That way, going through that process, you hope to come with something that will resonate with the audience, that will touch something in them.
Do you miss any of the gags from the old TV series? Do you think you've hit the right gag quotient in those films?
I think you put as much humor in as the tone of what you're doing will sustain. And we were always very fortunate to have Michael Caine, along for the ride to drop, the odd
bomb,
line, the odd funny line, the odd bit of heart, and also Morgan Freeman. We had some wonderful actors in there, but those guys particularly, they lent a degree of warmth to something that otherwise could be too dark, too cold.
Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.